Unless you've been living under a rock, you know Sweetgreen. It's kind of like Chipotle for salads. In 2021, the founders took the company public. It was one of the rare fast casual restaurants to make that leap. This conversation with Sweetgreen co-founder Nicolas Jammet is interesting because what happens when the guy whose job it is to come up with innovative ideas for the company suddenly has to run a publicly traded machine? Does all the fun go away? Where do you get your creation and innovation rocks off now? On this show, I'm always reading in between the lines of what guests say. Nick doesn't always say these things outright. He's too polished for that. But if you listen closely, you'll hear what the push and pull looks like of wanting to be in your excitement zone of genius as the guy who always is coming up with ideas, while also having to be the steady hand on the wheel of a now billion-dollar company. Check this out. Nick, welcome to Bossy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I know that at Sweetgreen, you've really implemented and helped put in place a lot of innovations. And I want to talk and start talking to you about that because I'm curious what are maybe like two of the top innovative ideas that you personally are most proud of that you've integrated and put into Sweetgreen?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say in the 18 years of doing this, and part of why we started doing this was really to reimagine and rethink the fast food experience and the fast food model, both for customers and team members, and everything from what we're sourcing, how we're prepping it, how we're talking about it, how we're serving it, how do you remove friction in the experience. And so it's kind of been one of the driving forces in what Sweetgreen is and how it's evolved over the years.
So my friend who works in advertising was telling me about how many businesses brag about never spending any money on marketing. And I get it. We all love saving money, but not investing in paid ads isn't really a flex. The real secret to getting ahead isn't about saving money. It's about getting creative with how you spend it. Lately, I've been looking into Amazon ads, and it's pretty incredible. You can reach the right people by leveraging Amazon's trillions of browsing, shopping, and streaming signals. And it's not just for businesses that sell directly on Amazon. So any small or medium business can create ads that show up on Prime Video or Twitch or Fire TV. Plus, there's not a minimum spend required. So not only can you get your ads on the big screen, but you get to access their proprietary brand and campaign metrics, meaning that your campaign results detailing how streaming TV ads are driving growth, and you get the data that you need to optimize your placements. Check this out at advertising.amazon.com/start now and learn how your business can gain the edge with Amazon ads.
And so for us, as I think about, some of the innovations I'm most excited by and proud of, I would say our sourcing standards, we look at every category. So whether it's, all of our proteins with no antibiotics or hormones or added colors, or whether it's organic produce or no seed oils in our cooking, or a lot of different factors around no preservatives, synthetic chemicals in our food, no added colors.
You're pretty much
really
like,
just
I'm proud that we're
pure,
not
clean whole food.
And you're like, I'm proud we're not feeding you crap. Pretty much,
and exactly. And it sounds like an obvious thing, but it's not so obvious in our space. So holistically, I'm really proud of that. And we've had the pleasure of working with some of the greatest chefs in the country. And one that really stands out to me that I'm most proud of was when we did a bowl with Dan Barber from Blue Hill and Row 7, who's kind of like the godfather of like sustainable ag and fine dining. And so we bred a vegetable together called the kogi nut squash and grew it in 6 farms, 23 acres, and it came out of the ground. And we got to tell this story about this custom squash that was grown to be the most delicious squash.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I don't think that we think about like fast casual kinds of places making food or like producing collabs in that kind of way, like in the way we think about like a sneaker or a brand collab. It sounds like you're really pioneering that. Can you kind of like back up a little bit though and like give a landscape of like, because somebody else, you're not the first one to do a collab, right? Or to do that kind of partnership, but maybe it was in a different space. So can you give us the context of like when you came up with this idea to do this, you were looking at other people doing collabs maybe in like fine dining, or like where were the collabs you were already seeing that you said we could apply this?
Yeah, I think we saw a lot of collabs across other industries, and there might have been some going on in our space, but it was kind of atypical for fast casual or fast food to look up to fine dining and try to connect dots there. And
Yeah.
early on in our journey, we saw that honestly it started because a lot of the farms we were using, I'd go to these fine dining restaurants and notice that these are the same farms that these chefs were using. And so there felt like there was this connection point over the quality of the food. And obviously we were very inspired by so many of these chefs in terms of flavor and storytelling. And so, and a lot of them, quite frankly, were also just customers. It's where they'd come to eat. We'd see them in line at Sweetgreen when they weren't in their own kitchens.
Yeah.
So it felt like a cool storytelling opportunity to say, this chef that has the most incredible fine dining experience, how would they think about taking their approach in an accessible, fast casual format?
And prior to
Making it
this, like a chef that's doing fine dining is probably only collabing with who?
I think when Sweetgreen grew, we saw this kind of trend of really celebrating chefs as rock stars and really like elevating them to a stage and really, giving them the credit they're due. And so I think it was somewhat of a new thing. I mean, a lot of chefs were obviously collabing with other restaurants, other fine dining chefs, popping up at each other's restaurants. And so we saw a lot of that, or staging at other restaurants. But in the fast food space, it was not. I hadn't seen it, or wasn't just common in general.
Yeah. I guess I'm curious about like the other places where you were seeing it. Like if you were like, oh, I see this when I have like, I look at sneaker brands that I like, or I see this like where, because all the time,
for sure.
Say more about that.
Yeah. I think at Sweetgreen, we often look outside the food industry for inspiration and to understand how other brands are built, how other brands are introducing products or storytelling. And, we're very inspired by a bunch of, whether it's like the great grocery chains like Whole Foods at their peak, or a lot that happens in fashion around storytelling and dropping product that creates a lot of hype and excitement. And so very inspired by a bunch of different industries, and a lot in fashion too.
There's definitely a bunch of art in being innovative in product development too, because like sometimes you can ask your customer what they want and they're able to tell you, but there's like a threshold of innovative where just like they can't really think that far. They're not like spending as much time on the problem. Like if people notoriously talk about this with like the not the iPhone, like I literally can't even remember what it's called. Not the iPhone. What's the one that's just music?
Oh, the iPod.
iPod, thank you. People were thinking this with the iPod. Like, if you asked people what they wanted at the time, they wouldn't have been like, oh, we want an iPod. They would have told you, I want a better Walkman. Just the concept of thinking of an iPod was like that. So sometimes you have to like give people something that they didn't ask for because they're not even thinking of that. Are there places where you go like, actually, customer insights are not going to be helpful for us to innovate? We actually just need to like come up with something on our own and see how they respond?
Yeah, and this is where the art and science comes in, because the insights are important. They're important, like input, and you have to understand kind of what the customer is saying about how they feel. But we don't go to the insights to be like, tell me exactly what flavor or what product you want, because it kind of, even if something scores as like this is the highest purchase intent of something, if you live and die by the insights and follow the data too hard, you just end up, it's hard to innovate. You end up looking like everyone else because the middle, the mass group of customers is telling you this is what they want, probably because it exists out there and that's what they like.
Right.
And so we try very hard here to use the insights and be informed by them, but not let them drive all the decisions. And it depends, some decisions you want to use them a bit more. Like when you're creating some, whether it's like in-app digital experience, there's things that actually might be more intuitive and make sense for the customer. On the product side, it's important to, again, understand what we'll sell, but also how do we introduce newness to the customer that they maybe weren't expecting, or that maybe hasn't been seen in the industry. Customers never, when we did the Dan Barber collab or a lot of our menu innovations, a lot of those things didn't come from an insights telling us like, I want a better tasting squash. We just knew that people wanted to celebrate ingredients and kind of like see the storytelling around why this thing tasted the best.
Yeah.
And so we literally went to go create the most delicious squash to tell that story of, look at this squash that's sitting at the center of the plate.
Who came up with this idea? Like, do you remember on the team who was like, oh, I know what we need to do. We need to like collab with Dan Barber. We need to take something from another industry, pull it in, kind of like let what they do in fine dining, pull in a collaboration, and then like make a squash. Do you remember like where that idea came from?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the idea came from just me talking to Dan pretty regularly. He was also an early investor. I've known him.
Yeah.
I grew up in the New York restaurant and hospitality community as a young kid. And so knowing him, knowing what he stands for, knowing how he thinks about food, and then hearing when he was going to start row 7, before he could even, his sentence was done, I was like, we're in. How many seeds can you get me?
Yeah.
And so, that was kind of the beginning of what was an experiment. No one had ever grown this thing at scale. And so it was a great journey to go on and a great story to tell.
Yeah, this is interesting because I'm often like reading in between the lines of what I hear people say. And what I'm hearing you say is like, there was not a whole process where we were like trying to come up with an innovative idea. I came up with an idea. I'm the genius here. You didn't say it that way, but like, I'm the genius here. I got good ideas and like, I knew it was the right idea. So I implemented that thing. Like, that's kind of what I'm hearing you say. And it makes me think about like my friends that are best at like coming up with ideas. Like, they're the idea guy. I have a friend that just like, he's just like a bottomless well of ideas, just constantly having ideas. There's an element of like trust in your own genius that you kind of have to have, because like sometimes people are gonna be pushing back against the idea. Can you think of times where people were like pushing against something and you had an idea, they're like, I don't really know, and you move forward with it anyway?
I think early on when we were smaller, it was a lot easier to just do that. And I think now that we're a little bigger and we have this brilliant marketing team that honestly knows more about the customer than I do and is closer to it and understands where the world is going, a lot of the best ideas obviously come from them.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of, we have a really great process of constant collaboration and dialogue and brainstorming around as we think about our calendar and products and how to tell stories. Ideas come from everywhere.
Yeah.
But part of the intention around scaling a business like Sweetgreen and telling a broader story was we have to hire people that believe in the mission, but that can bring that creativity to the table. And so even as a founder, if I have an idea and I think it's important, doesn't mean it's going to be the best idea. But having that creative workroom of, brand and marketing folks that can really think about, where is culture, where's the conversation, and there may be parts of it that, I don't even understand, and that's normal because I have like my world.
Yeah. But good ideas come out of your world.
Good ideas come out of my world, and brilliant ideas come out of our marketing and creative team. So I think it's great to have that kind of like broader group around creative. So creative isn't always from one person.
How do you feel about that from a personal experience perspective? Because like I notice for my own company, as it gets bigger, there's almost like less space for me to fully like do the things that I like love the most, because it's somebody else's job now. And like I'm really great at coming up with ideas. I love this. How come everybody else is doing it now? Like there's a little bit of, you need it, right? It's part of scaling, but it also feels kind of weird because it's like someone taking your thing and your job. Do you ever feel that way?
At times, as we've scaled, there's been that feeling, but ultimately what gets me more excited is knowing that there's trust in the people we're hiring and that we're hiring brilliant people to come and do exactly this. This is their job.
Yeah.
And I think as a founder, as you scale, your job obviously evolves and shifts. And so for me, it's really understanding where I can add value to the team and where I can be most supportive and helpful, and where I need to lead a conversation or where I need to listen and let them lead.
Yeah.
And so ultimately it's having confidence and trust in the team and the engine that you're building, the muscle that you're building here at the company.
Okay, we're gonna pause for a quick activity called Office Hours, brought to you by Amazon Ads. One of our listeners sent in a marketing question, and we as a community are gonna crowdsource our advice. So drop your vote into the comments to weigh in. Kate says, I run a company that helps founders complete a rebrand. How can I position my services so that I can expand from my normal 3-month projects to long-term 6 to 12-month retainers? There is a marketing hot take that says you have to niche down in order to grow. But I don't know if that's always true or applies to Kate's situation. The tension is, does she need to stay niche down in project-based work in order to keep growing? Or can she broaden her model into retainers without losing traction? When it comes to Kate's situation, do you think that this "you have to niche down to grow" marketing hot take is true or false? And what ideas do you have for her and her business? Head to the comments to vote and share your thoughts. Yeah, there's an element of that is like what's right for the company. And then there's also an element of that of like what feels good for your personal creative expression. And I think like, yes, like so much of a business is the tactics of running a business. But as founders, like there's usually a thing, if you've lasted multiple years, there's a thing of it that you like. right? And
Mhm.
so I'm curious where you find your own kind of creative expression now, like where you want to put it in the company. I'll give you an example of this. Like one of my favorite founders, you know how people play that game and it's like the top 5 rappers that you like and you like list your top
Yeah.
5. Like I definitely on my top 5 of entrepreneurs and founders is Sergey Brin at Google, because
Yeah.
he's just like, he's the idea guy. He knows he's the weird, quirky idea guy, and he lets himself be the weird, quirky idea guy. And like Larry
Mhm.
Page goes and like runs a lot of the like the advertising side of the business. And I remember when I worked at Google, I would see Sergey and he'd be like riding around on a scooter, just like going from space to space, just like coming up with weird ideas like Google Fiber and Google Glass and just like trying stuff. And I look to him and I see like, oh, that's someone who really like knows their zone of genius, and like he did a good job crafting out like
Mhm.
I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna just come up with weird shit in the lab and like cook it up,
Yeah.
and like some of it will work, some of it will crash. I'm curious, like just, I mean, you might be in the middle of this too, but like where are you wanting to craft out like space for yourself for the stuff that you like in your company?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, the focus is always on like what is best for the company, what's going to drive the
Yeah.
most change and drive the company forward. So
Yeah.
that is definitely top of mind for me. The places where I dive in the deepest is on product development with our culinary and marketing teams, and then honestly with our supply chain teams around our ethos. As we scale, there's inherent, just natural pressure to soften some of these standards because some of those markets don't exist at scale. You have to create them. They're more expensive. And so, really solidifying and staying true to the food ethos and all these standards that I talked about before
Yeah.
around how we buy and what we're buying is so important because most restaurants, as they scale, the quality of their product gets worse.
Yeah. Who's an entrepreneur for you on your like top 5? You don't give me the whole 5, but give me like one person who's like up there for you. Like, I like how they do this.
I mean, the Airbnb founders were big inspiration. I think what they've done and
Yeah.
how they've scaled that to beyond more than just the core product is really, really impressive.
Because they've got like Airbnb experiences and like all kinds of spin-offs of what it maybe started as, is what you mean.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. That's interesting. Are you thinking about spin-offs for yourself? Like, is that kind of a model that's interesting to you of like not just staying in this core thing, but we've got all this whole ecosystem of new kinds of things we added?
Yeah, I think we have this like core product and core business and core ethos, and it's really important to own that and stay true to it.
Yeah.
At the same time, we've been broadening what Sweetgreen is and what's on our menu and evolving, ultimately who our customer is. And it's been exciting to, even something like adding steak a year ago. We had never had red meat on our menu. And so adding
Yeah.
steak attracted a whole different customer and a whole different occasion. And so, as we think about evolving our menu, there's definitely more opportunities to capture more occasions and more customers, but still stay true to who we are and kind of source everything, whatever the new product is, according to this strong food ethos.
I want to talk about this concept of originality, and I have a question for you. It's a true or
Mhm.
false question. You can tell me if you think it's true or if you think it's false, but you have to give me a leaning on true or leaning on false. True or false? People are going to steal your ideas whether you like it or not, so you shouldn't worry about it.
True. I definitely lean
True.
more true on that because I think ultimately, unless it's like more like IP or something more protected, then obviously that there's ways to protect that. So
Yeah.
outside of anything that's more proprietary, um, generally everything is referential. So many things everything is inspired by everything, and I think ultimately and that's okay. I think when brands are inspired by something, they have to take that idea or that thing that was the seed of inspiration and evolve it to be something different for them. So it can be based on something, but I think there's a lot of copycats out there that like to just copy and paste, and we see that not just in our industry but everywhere. But I think broader inspiration is okay and it's normal. It's part of the whole
Yeah.
creative evolution and the world that's out there and how brands evolve.
That's a very mature answer, actually, because I live in Mexico. I live in Mexico City. There is I thought that it was you. I thought that Sweetgreen had expanded. There's this place called Greengrass, and they copied the logo, the way that the store worked. Like it's a pretty close. Like they just got all your inspo and did it.
Yeah.
And I thought for many years that like that was your business and you had expanded, and I realized like, oh no, they just got like 28 locations of a copycat of your business model, and I am so curious how you learned about that to begin with. And like how you felt about it. Like there's the kind of like what I had to do was the leader, but then there's the how I felt about it. Can you tell me about that?
Right. Yeah. So I would say, we have examples like that all over the world. And early on as a founder, I took it really personally. And especially because some of it is very blatant specific, whether it's like, to your point, exact logo, and there's confusion. It creates confusion for consumers. And that to me, as someone that's spent, put my blood, sweat, and tears into building Sweetgreen and what it is, when I see other people just kind of copy it. And this is just like anyone, I used to take it personally. Today, I try to look beyond it. Obviously, we do what we can to what we need to do to protect our marks and our IP. And we have lawyers that are sending letters to whoever we think we should send letters to. But ultimately, I think my point of view is that this means that there's validation for this type of food or this business model that people want it in different countries. And so whether it's me saying, okay, now it looks like I can go open in Mexico.
They validated it for you.
Yeah. And so I think there's ways to view it differently. And, in competition in general, when we started Sweetgreen, there weren't many brands or restaurants that looked like us. And now there's more. And I see that as a good thing.
It sounds like you take it seriously, but you're also pretty chill and lax about the whole concept overall. Like people copying you. I'm talking about like a company in Japan or a company in Mexico just like copying what you're doing. And you're like, yeah, it happened. It wasn't great, but like, it happens. Like you seem very chill about all of this and this concept of like coming up with great ideas. What is, and people taking them, what is making you calm about this?
Well, first of all, I think in general, my disposition is quite calm.
He's
so
a
even
calm
if I'm
dude.
agitated about something, I don't show it too much. But and just to be clear, like we do enforce and protect our marks like very aggressively when we need to. And then there's times that I just think it'll be a waste of energy because it's more loosely inspired and it's more trade dress and if I had a legal team of like 100 people here to I'd maybe have them go a little further. But for us, it's really, we try to stay focused on the core business, what drives the core business, how to protect our marks and what's unique about Sweetgreen, but in a way that's, that makes sense for the business.
What advice do you have for someone who's worried about someone taking their business idea, either an idea for a new business or an idea that they have inside of their business?
My advice would be a few things. First would be identify what makes your idea or your product special. And if there is a way to protect it, that's first step, do that, protect it with some form of IP protection. Secondly, I think it's just a constructive pressure to make your product better and to innovate on it, faster than someone else might. And, it's, the law of free markets and capitalism. Like if it's a good idea, someone else is going to do it too.
Yeah.
And you just have to do it better and be faster and first, or be more thoughtful, or have a unique point of view on it. So I think that's just, free markets that we live in.
And be generally chill like you.
Yeah.
It's good. Like this is actually what I'm taking away from it. Maybe you feel frustrated sometimes inside, but I'm taking away that there's a chillness that one can have and then just go back to work.
Yeah. Well, my philosophy in general, whether it's things like this or in general, is, I believe that you should get really passionate and upset and have strong emotions and really dive deep into the things that you can control. And there's things that you can't control, even if you want to. And those, it's not worth the energy or the anguish or the frustration. And you should understand them and understand like what you could do to change, like what is in your control to change some of those things or elements. But I really try to stay focused and use my energy, and we do here at Sweetgreen in general, on the things you can control.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. I think it's really inspiring for folks to hear like how you think about innovation, how you think about the highs and lows of all of that, and what comes with being a smart innovator with great ideas. Thank you so much for being on Bossy.
Thanks for having me.